back to another edition of Staying Major. I am your host, Major Payne himself, Eric Menk, and today we have a very distinguished guest in the house. To give you a brief rundown of some of the accolades our coach here today has accumulated over his career. He's coached college basketball in the United States. He's coached in the NBL in New Zealand, where he was a 4-time NBL Coach of the Year. He coached club teams in Europe, in Turkey, Greece, and Romania. He's coached teams in Lebanon, China. He's been the head coach of national teams in Malaysia, New Zealand, Lebanon, Jordan, and right here in the Philippines. He's currently the head coach of the defending UAAP champions, Ateneo Blue Eagles. You will be hard-pressed to find a coach with more international coaching experience in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Coach Tab Baldwin in the house today. Welcome to Staying Major, Coach.
Great to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing? I saw last time I saw you and your team, you guys were at the Jones Cup. Did a heck of a job over there. Were you pretty pleased with your team's performance?
Yeah, I was. We went there without a lot of expectations, even from ourselves. We weren't there really just to try and improve. And I was suspicious of the level that we were going to run into. There might be, a bridge too far for us. But the boys really stepped up, and I got to give them a lot of credit. They deserve it because I think that they wanted that level of competition. They wanted to measure themselves, and I think they came out pretty well. So all in all, it was a good experience. Yeah,
I was wondering about that because, when I knew you guys were going over there, I think everyone was kind of like, well, how are they going to do? But it's great we're sending a team there after what happened with Gilas. And then you guys performed so well, and it was really an uplifting experience, I thought, just being here watching the games. And I wanted to ask you, it must be a great learning experience at Jones Cup playing, 8 or 9 games in 8 or 9 days? Is it 8 or 9?
Yeah, 8 games in 8 days.
8 days. So you probably were able to learn a lot about your team playing back to back to back to back to back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were fortunate in that, we were able to take 16 players and rotate our roster. So it wasn't like everybody had to play big minutes 8 days in a row. I think with the coaching staff, we did a pretty good job of rotating guys. But learning about them was exactly what we wanted to do, and I think it was the level that we were confronting that probably was our biggest teacher. Playing a team like South Korea's national team, they ended up shooting 63% against us, so we learned a lot about our defense that day, what we couldn't do and what we need to do better. But each game, as it always is, but at that level a little bit more so, but each game was a lesson for us looking forward to the UAAP.
When you go into a tournament like that, how much of an emphasis, I always wonder about this, how much emphasis do you put on winning in comparison to maybe growing or maybe, expanding your rotation to kind of get the guys' experience? Because ultimately the UAAP is what I imagine your main focus. But, you put on the Philippines jersey, you go there, of course you want to compete, you want to win. There's pressure here that want to see you guys perform well. So how do you prioritize between the two?
It was tough because, personally, Ateneo has been a great teacher for me as a coach. It might sound strange to say that after 35 years. You go into another job and you start learning again, but I really did because it was the amateur level. And for me, I really changed my philosophy about coaching. I became much more developmental in terms of my goals for my players. So what mattered to me was getting these guys into pro ball, which is what their dreams are. So now you've got the conflicting, goals of winning games, developing players. It's a preseason tournament, so there was a lot of conflicts, and then you throw in that we are wearing the Filipinas name on our shirt. So we had to really juggle and talk a lot to the players about, what we were there for, and, make sure that we didn't lose respect for the country's colors, make sure that we kept our eyes focused on both individual growth and development, which is extremely important in our environment, developing ourselves for the UAAP, which is only a month away, but also making sure that, particularly in light of what had happened with Gilas, that we did try to, demonstrate to the Philippine basketball public that we could go out and fight, in the traditional sporting sense of fighting, and bring pride to the jersey, and make sure, most importantly, that we didn't embarrass anybody in any way. That was a pretty strict directive as well from MVP. So it was important to us to try and cover all that ground. But being on the road, as you know, as a player, when you get away with your team and you get into an environment where you're together a lot, you have a lot of time to talk. You have a lot of time to sort of build the ideology of your program. And I think we did a lot of that there. And so it was very useful for us. And fortunately, results and performances went our way. And, we were able to accomplish, I think, a lot for ourselves and, again, for the basketball landscape here.
Yeah, it was great. It was just great to witness that Taipei A game was very exciting. And people, I woke up and I checked my Twitter and I just flooded with replays of the game and people commenting. And it was great to see after what had happened just a couple weeks earlier, or maybe 10 days earlier.
Yeah, it was fresh. It was fresh.
You've coached national teams. You coach professionally. How has the adjustment been for you? And you talked about learning. Like, what have you learned now coaching a younger group of guys than what you had been accustomed to before?
It was so strange taking the Ateneo job. I didn't ask for it. I didn't really want it. But MVP, he has a way of nudging people around when he wants to. And, he wanted me over there doing that job. But it had been, 30 years since I had coached at the amateur level in the States. And, that's a long time to be coaching guys like you, pros, in their 30s and late 20s. It's an entirely different dynamic. So the first year in Ateneo, I went in there and, kind of ignorant, honestly, and just started coaching the way I normally coached. And a lot of people looked at the results of that season, getting to the final, and, we had a lot of conflict there because we had academic issues with a whole bunch of recruits and we lost a lot of players. There was a lot to deal with. And I went in there and honestly, I did a terrible job. The assistant coaches, they taught me so much that year. They're all Ateneans. They're all great guys. They're all good coaches. And they really got me thinking differently. And I have to say that a very, very young basketball team really carried me in year one. And we kind of figured a lot of things out in year one. We made it to the finals and lost to a great LaSalle team. And I don't think we belonged in the finals, frankly, that year. And you got to give the credit to the players. But we did learn the lessons that year. And so from there, we completely modified the way that we did things. We changed the philosophy. The philosophy became about the players entirely. And it can be tough to say that to a vibrant alumni that, look, you want us to win, but frankly, it's not a big deal for us. And the administration and the priests and everybody wants us to win. I really believe, I'm a process-oriented guy. I really believe in the process. And with young players, the process became entirely about development. And I mean entirely. We start our season in September. It really isn't until sort of the middle of July that we even start talking about what the team is going to do. So from late January to July, we're trying to build players. Simply that. And I think with what we saw last year, I think we got it right. Okay. You always have to modify it, but I think essentially our philosophy is right.
Wow, that's great. That was one thing that I've always been curious about, is about the training here specifically. And I've never really quite got it because I grew up in the United States. I'm used to the basketball season being 4 or 5 months, and then you have an off season where a lot of development happens, whether it be strength and conditioning or whether it be, hey, you look at your season, you can kind of look at your weaknesses, and then you work on developing that until maybe you come back around to school the next year. And here it's a full-time gig. So I wondered how you, in most teams, I think, practice year-round, do normal basketball practice, and I was always kind of like, and they run a long practice, and I was like, man, that's got to be taxing for the athletes that are also going to school. So if I'm picking up what you said, right, development from January to July, and then you start working on team stuff from there?
Right. I mean, it's really strange because you're right, and I'm used to the U.S. system and, grew up and learned a lot there. It is full-time here. You know, we finish the season in early December, and we get started again in sort of mid to late January. So it's not much time off, and that's Christmas, and they're fully off. When I first took the job, it was right into Summer League basketball the first year in season 79, I think. Mm-hmm. And we went up against LaSalle, and they literally just bullied us all over the court. You know, a tremendously well-trained and physical, strong team, and, you know, Ben and Bala, and it was a big lesson for our players and for our coaches. So when we rolled through that year, you know, it was evident to me that we were weak, that we had the wrong approach to playing the game. We were ill-disciplined in a lot of things, and our players were really under-trained for fundamental performances. And being a disciplinarian myself, and always have been, you know, those sorts of fundamental qualities are extremely important. So the first thing I did in January of season 80, I believe, was stuck them in the weight room and gave them very specific goals. I said, look, nobody's going to bully us anymore. And a lot of people have looked at the physical development of our team over the last 2 years. They've seen 30 Ravenna, who was a good athlete. All of a sudden, I see your Hulk standing over there. You know, he's like a mini Hulk now, you know, walking around. But not just him. We had guys lose an immense amount of baby fat that they were carrying around. We became aerobically more fit. We gained a whole lot of lean muscle, which we measured all of this. We took a very scientific approach. So that was step number one. And step number two was, you know, get on the court and do a heck of a lot of fundamental training. We identified a whole lot of fundamental factors that, again, we took a very scientific approach. We broke the game down into, you know, not just shooting, dribbling, passing, and defense. Even those were broken down into passing strength, passing accuracy, shooting footwork, and on and on and on. We tested our players, we measured them, we tested them again, and we put them through drill sequences that we designed with the coaches. And it's a luxury having 7 or 8 assistant coaches, I can tell you. And, you know, we went to work. And credit to the players, they did all of that. And, you know, we've developed a pretty scientific system, which is really modeled in getting these guys to be PBA level basketball players or even Gilas level. That's the goal.
That's so interesting and refreshing to hear. I wonder if that will be, hopefully that'll kind of turn the tide for other coaches to do the same. Did you get any objection when you started to implement a lot of strength and conditioning and skill work into the daily practices? Was there any blowback or like, hey, we want these guys doing something else? Or
well, you and I don't know each other very well.
Apparently not.
I'm relatively, probably not relatively. I'm probably totally autocratic. Blowback is irrelevant to me.
Okay.
You know, there's really only one person who has any latitude to blow back against me, and that's MVP. And he's just looking for results. And, you know, I took a gamble. For me, taking this pathway, believing in the process, I believed it would yield results. And we were fortunate that it did, because if it hadn't, I'm sure MVP would have looked elsewhere. And that's the nature of being a professional coach and a bit of a mercenary, having traveled around the world. That's life. You know, you apply your philosophy, you hope you get support. When it works, you do. When it doesn't, you know, you make sure your passport's up to date.
Well, my father-in-law is a avid Ateneo alumnus and supporter. He goes to all the games. My wife went to Ateneo as well. So I get, even though I may miss some of the games, I definitely get updates at the dinner table a lot about how the season is going. And I've been to a few of the finals games that you guys have participated in. So I wanted to rewind a little bit, though. And how did the opportunity come about for you to come to the Philippines?
Well, it goes back to a point in my career. I'd been traveling around from 2005. When I left New Zealand, 2006, I left the national team. I took a job in Turkey in 2005, and then they kind of came in conflict with one another, the national team of New Zealand and the professional coaching in Europe. So I made a decision to move, you know, sort of full-time into professional. And then from 2005 to 2013, I really bounced around, and, you know, you highlighted the national teams that I coached, and it was fantastic. I enjoyed it. There was some tough jobs. but love my players, love the travel, love the exposure to different cultures. But about 2013, I said, man, this is enough. I gotta stabilize myself a little bit. So I went back to New Zealand from China, where it was my last stop, and told my wife, I said, this is it. We're going to settle down. We're going to enjoy life here. And no sooner did that happen than two things happened right after that. I got approached by Butch Antonio from Gilas, who I knew through playing against Gilas a bit. And he said Gilas was coming down to Australia and New Zealand for a tour. And, could I help them, logistically get some games? And ended up doing a lot more than that. But meeting Chot and working with Chot. And Chot said, come along to practice. And how about, showing us some stuff defensively that you're working on. And it evolved into an offer to come into consulting. And at the same time, the Hitachi Club from Japan approached me. And they put a really big offer in front of me. But I love the international game. And, I was really conflicted, because here was a job to go to Japan and coach 10 months a year and, be on the road again. Or go up to Manila, spend going to the World Championship, or even then it was FIBA Asia that year, and just helping out the team. And so I chose the shorter route. I chose the route of just being involved in international basketball, thinking I would just go back to New Zealand and slot back into my job there and coach my team there. But, one thing led to another, and it evolved, and the consulting job turned into full-time employment up here, and so I was on the road again.
Nice. That's an interesting story. What are some of the challenges coaching a national team? Because I find the way the tournaments are now, that along with what I see here is the PBA season's going on, they'll stop it. You'll get a couple of weeks to have them full time, and then you play. I'm assuming it's, especially with the home and away format, it's probably like that now all over the world. Like, it is. It's got to be pretty challenging getting your team prepared for a tournament that's going to be 2 weeks, and you only have a certain amount of hours to work with them.
It is. I mean, I haven't done that format.
Okay.
I was involved when we had the summer tournaments, and
that's right.
You'd assemble all the teams in one place, and you'd play like we did in the Jones Cup. You'd play a whole bunch of games in a short period, and we did that in 13 here in FIBA Asia. 14 was the World Champs. 15 was FIBA Asia in China. We finished runners-up. And then 16 was Olympic qualifying here. So those are all, assemble a bunch of teams. Now with the home and away format, it's much more intrusive into the professional leagues all over the world.
Yeah.
So national teams are having a hard time, because... And I hate it personally, because as a coach, what FIBA has done is they've really minimized the value of coaching. The longer you have with your team, the more impact you can have as a coach, obviously. So now they've reduced that so much that talent has to shine through. And they've put a lot of pressure on the lesser or the mediocre teams, or the teams that aren't as well resourced. Here in the Philippines, our biggest problem is availability of players, because we're well resourced. We have very, very good basketball players, but it's not even a question of how long can we have them together. It's which ones can we get, which is really frustrating as a coach, because from year to year it changes. And if you look at the great teams over the years, that the great Argentinian team, the great Spain team, even the great New Zealand team that I had, we had continuity of players from year to year. We didn't have them for that long to train them, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month on a good year, sometimes only a couple of weeks. But we had continuity. We knew the same players were coming year to year. There'd only be 1, 2, maybe 3 changes in your roster. Here in the Philippines, all you got to do is track the record.
Yeah.
And you see that there's massive changes every year. So it's really tough, whoever is in that coach's seat. Yeah. It's really tough, because you got to reassemble, retrain, redevelop a culture. And that's the most important thing at the national team level, is have that culture that you're playing for your country. And even though you're a 34-year-old pro, you're going to go on the floor for the loose ball, because this is for honor, this is for country. So getting that out of pro players is one of the hard things to do. But, getting that playing culture is extremely important. And we're going up against China, Korea, Japan, and they have that.
Yeah.
we're, shuffling the deck every single time, and it's tough. It's tough for the coaches.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be the politics behind the scenes, and then the different players. Like, you almost have to start over again every time if you have new players, if you're trying to develop a culture rather than adding to it with just a couple changes. I think I was at Alaska at the time. So Alex Compton, who's been a friend of mine for 20 years, but he was my head coach at that time, and he was your assistant for Gilas. And he was telling me a little bit about some of the challenges that you guys had, and then the qualifier that was here. And it was something that even I hadn't even realized, but the way the schedule was set up, first of all, you were playing a couple really good teams. High-ranked teams. I think France was 5th? 7th. And New Zealand was ranked definitely ahead of the Philippines. I'm not sure what they were ranked.
Under 20. I remember about 19 then.
And both teams had months to prepare for you guys, right? Because you were playing them both. It was their first games of the tournament, where you had 1 day to prepare for New Zealand, and then obviously France being, like you said, 7th in the country with multiple NBA players on it. That must have been a heck of a challenge as well.
Beyond that, really. And I mean, they didn't have months to prepare, but they had, as you said, the way the schedule worked out, it was the worst possible draw for us, because we play the best team in the tournament in the first game. And, I had a lot of people say to me, and I've been in these tournaments long enough, and you might be surprised, you probably won't, but some of your listeners will. A lot of people said, well, give the France game away. Focus on New Zealand, because you can't beat France. Focus on New Zealand, get yourself into the second round of the tournament and see where it goes from there. I've heard that many times in going to these tournaments. People will say, pick your poison, and France is too much poison. So if you throw everything at that game, what have you got left for New Zealand? Because it's the next day. So the schedule was terrible because we played, the best team. We don't get a day off. New Zealand sits and watches us. They scout us, how we play the night before. Yeah. They're fresh. So both teams are fresh the day they play us. And we're scouted in the second game in what is supposedly the more winnable game. So it was a bad roll of the dice, and personally, I don't ever give a game away. Yeah. You want somebody to do that, get another coach. It's that simple for me, and I'm okay with that. If you want another coach, get another coach, but I'll never give a game away. And we went out, and I thought we stood toe to toe with France. We played them to 7 points, and I believe as a professional basketball player, you suit up every day. You come to work every day. And I don't think my players backed off of that. I think they did a good job. They came up against really a clever New Zealand team, and they were simply more prepared than we were because they had that extra day. I don't think fitness was an issue. I think the scouting and, having a day to sit and watch us play, we didn't have a day to see and sit what their adjustments were to us. Yeah. And that was tough for us to overcome.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize what goes into a tournament like that, or the mentality, or even how the scheduling can really determine results. So when Alex was telling me, and I hadn't even really thought of it either, but I definitely knew it was a tough schedule for you guys, and I thought that Gilas competed in those games and played both teams really tough. Now, what was the experience? I was trying to remember. When you guys finished runner-up in China, I remember that tournament. I actually remember going to watch the gold medal game with a group of friends. But what I remember about that game is it definitely got a little intense, and the officiating was, I'm biased, but it seemed to be a little home cooking involved in that gold medal game. What was that experience like at that tournament?
Well, you don't get Chinese referees. But you do play in their home. And, China has a reputation of being much, much tougher at home. If you look at China's results when they travel, they're terrible. They don't travel well at all. And so it's no wonder that every time you're in an Olympic qualifying year, it's in China. When it's a world qualification year and China's only got to finish in the top 5 or the top 7, then it plays outside, like 2013 when it was here. You have to see the politics.
Yeah.
And can you blame FIBA for not wanting China at the Olympics? That's 1 billion people, 1.5 billion people who tune out when basketball is on if their team isn't at the Olympics. So don't be naive, and I know you're not, but to your listeners, don't be naive and think politics don't play into these things hugely. And, it's not a far stretch as a coach or as a player to say, the refereeing has its biases too sometimes.
Yeah.
And you have to fight against that. You're naive if you don't. I was there in the finals in 2011 with Jordan against China. We lost by a bucket to China on a very controversial call right at the end of the game. And then we go back in 2015 and play them again in the finals. And again, our bus, all electrical bus somehow hasn't been charged to go to the game. They have to fix the net on our end during warm-ups before the game. All of these things they're laughable, but in the moment they're highly frustrating, and that's why it's done. It's done to frustrate you and get you off your game. So keeping everybody focused and on task is tough, and you say it gets a little bit intense. Well, I want it to. I want to do anything I can to shake the opponent, and if it means a little bit of niggle and a well-placed elbow, and I can't say these things now in light of what's recently happened, but you've been around long enough to know this is part of sport.
Yeah, definitely part of it. And it's, knowing some of the things going in might happen or are likely to happen, and then actually witnessing it transpire, it's got to be frustrating, especially in a gold medal game like that where, countries are involved and all, it's super tough situation to be in and to handle, I'm sure, for the team.
Look, I've been in this racket so long. I saw things at even the world championship level that would really make you shake your head. In 2002, my New Zealand team got to the Final Four, beaten by Yugoslavia. The final was Yugoslavia-Argentina. There was a call at the end of that game by a Greek referee who was very close friends with the guy who ran FIBA, who was Yugoslavian at the time. Very close friends. Vlade Divac got away with, murder. Critical game, sent it into overtime, and when it went into overtime, then Yugoslavia beat Argentina. So I've seen a lot. I'm not surprised by anything that I see.
It's a wild world out there, and crazy. In international basketball, like you said, a lot of crazy things can happen. I want to take a break here real quick to talk about our sponsors. First, expresshoops.ph is the easiest way to book a basketball court in Metro Manila. If you're looking to book a basketball court, please go to expresshoops.ph. There you can see schedules, pricing, and you can book right there on their website. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to fight through traffic. You can book right there. And if you book on their website, use my coupon code STAYINMAJOR to win a prize from this podcast. That's expresshoops.ph. Book a basketball court there today. A-Game After Sport Rub Down is an Elk cologne that smells great and is scientifically designed to help with your recovery. So if you work out and you're sore, you can put this on, apply this to your body, and it'll help you recover so you can bring your A game to the next workout. On top of that, it smells great. Your friends will wonder what it is, and your girlfriend or wife will also love it. So go to agamesport.com. You can use my promo code EMENK30 to get 20% off of your purchase right there. So go there and check it out. Back with Coach Tab Baldwin. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you see as a coach. Like, you get through a game, they give you the stat sheet. What are you looking at?
That's a good question. It's a really good question because it sure isn't the same thing that most other people look at.
Okay. That's why I asked.
First of all, the official stat sheet isn't the most important stat sheet to me. There's other stats that we take as a coaching staff that relate a little bit more to execution and hustle and effort stats, which are important to us. But when I get the game stat sheet, usually the first thing I look at is rebounding, offensive rebounding by both teams. And we calculate a percentage, so we don't look at raw numbers. So very quickly we do a percentage, and we want to see that we're competing and getting hopefully 40% of our offensive rebounds. If we do that, we're going to be in great shape, almost no matter what else happens in the game. Second thing we look at is what's going on with the turnovers. And so offensive rebounds give us extra possessions, turnovers give away those possessions. So if we've got high turnovers along with offensive rebounds, it's a wash. We're not helping ourselves. So those are really the first things we talk to our team about. And then the next thing would be field goal percentage. How efficient are our offensive possessions? Are we getting good shots? Some of that you just know instinctively by watching the game.
Yeah.
But some of it is there's a story there in the stats, and then you go to the defensive side of the ball, and same thing. You look at your defensive field goal percentage, and then you combine that with I guess the anecdotal evidence that you have watching the game, and you say, look, we're having more trouble with their dribble drive offense than we are with their transition. So you want to then attack that when you address the players, and you break the game down that way. But I'm a Pat Riley advocate. He said no rebounds, no rings, and I believe that. So rebounding is a huge thing for us, and there's some UAAP teams that do that really well, and I think that's why you find them in the upper echelons of the league, and we want to do that as well.
What about, you mentioned turnovers, and it's just I feel just a grossly underestimated stat when you look at are you plus or are you minus, and if you're minus, how far in the minus are you? Is that something challenging watching a lot of UAAP over the years? Is that something I remember when I used to watch, I'd be like, man, if these teams would just focus on not turning it over as much, I think they'd probably be successful just with that. Like, has that been challenging for you?
You say that with a wry grin on your face. Having watched UAAP, it's more like a track meet than a basketball game sometimes.
Everyone's just so excited.
Correct. And it seems like the most important thing is how quickly we can get the ball from one end to the rim. And in trying to do that, a lot of times we don't even get it there. We turn it over. So, yes, I agree that offensive efficiency isn't a real high priority in most UAAP teams. And even though we may pay lip service to that, the way our players play, and you'll laugh again when I say this, it's quote unquote the Philippine style.
Yeah.
Well, the Philippine style is wrong when it leads to 20 plus turnovers, even 15 plus turnovers a game in a 40-minute game. I mean, you counter that to some degree with the pace of the game, and at Ateneo we try to keep our game possessions between 65 and 75. We know that if it gets up around 85, probably efficiencies are going to go down, which turnovers are going to go up. So. We're talking a little bit technical here, but that's the job. That's where we're at as coaches. So again, we don't look at turnovers as strictly how many. We look at it as a percentage of possessions.
Okay.
And we also try to force a certain number of turnovers as a percentage of possessions. So you might see 16 turnovers. That might be a good number, might be a bad number. Just depends on how many possessions there are in the game and what's the pace of the game. And, with our team, we even want to vary pace depending on opponent.
Yeah. So
it's important to us to control tempo. So, again, there's another stat that you don't see on the stat sheet that we look at pretty carefully is what's the tempo? What was our game plan related to the tempo? We don't want to try and outrun every team.
Yeah.
When you play a UE, you want to keep possessions down. Next year, UST will probably want to keep possessions down. When you play FEU, you want to get possessions up. And I believe we have a team that we can go both ways. Mm-hmm. But again, as long as the mentality and the discipline is there, that we're efficient in doing that and we're not throwing the ball all over the gym, then we can continue with that strategy.
That's super, super interesting. Has it been a process for you to try to communicate some of these values and how important they are to your young players?
Massive. Massive. But the good thing is that they're young players.
Yeah.
So while they're susceptible from a skill standpoint to making more turnovers, they're more susceptible to embrace philosophies and ideologies. And so I think we've had success there. And one of the interesting things we've done as a coaching staff is we compile a tremendous amount of video, not just from us, but from teams all over the world. And we look a lot at EuroLeague basketball. So we take, again, from this January to July period, we take the teams almost every day into a video session, which is part of their development. And after all, they're in college. They're supposed to be learning. Yep. We're supposed to be teaching. Just so happens that it's basketball instead of, humanities. So we take them in there and we say, this is the right way to play the game. We show them a lot of video. We break it down to a lot of detail. And they've been great. They absorb, they listen, and then they try to emulate. And I think that's one of the reasons we're improving.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And just the European basketball. You mentioned something earlier about the Filipino style of play. And I always find that's interesting as well, because that term gets thrown around a lot. And for me as a player, I want the style that's going to give me the best chance to win consistently. I don't want to be stubborn to where that's just my style of play. And if I can't win that way, I'm not going to stick with that style.
Or that's our culture.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, your goal is to win, right?
Correct.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes it's refreshing to hear that, because I almost feel like sometimes that's been used as an excuse or a crutch or just something to fall back on when we a high number of turnovers or a high number of fouls. That's one thing that frustrates me is why are we hacking so much? We're hacking all the time, and those are free throws. So,
well, the problem is that I think there's a blinder on the Philippine basketball landscape, because this country has been so good in basketball for so long that it becomes insular. It doesn't look outside enough, and when it does look outside, it looks only at the U.S., and it's a big mistake. Yeah. Because we can't be the U.S. It's simply impossible. So our cultural development here as a basketball nation has revolved around really the street ball, which has dominated so much of the play in this country. And it is entertaining, and it is fun, and it will work inside the borders of the country. But if you want to be successful outside, you've got to rise to the level of your opponents. And when your style of basketball can be exploited by disciplined, intelligent teams, and they will force you into innumerable mistakes, you have to look at yourself. Mm-hmm. And if I could just encapsulate what I believe the Philippine style of basketball is from a negative standpoint as opposed to what we should be, it's very simply this, that in Philippine basketball, you put the ball in a player's hands and that player sees what he can create for himself. When that runs into a wall, then he gives it to somebody else who does the same thing. Great basketball is played by players who, whatever they do on the floor, they do it to see what they can create for their teammates. That's why this was created as a team game. It wasn't created as a your turn, my turn style of play. It was created as, let's see what we can cohesively do to grit together to create the most efficient outcome. And I think that we're in conflict with that in this country all the time, because we have great, great basketball players who really don't know how to use their skill to help one another in their play. Yeah. It's not that they're selfish. It's not that they don't want to do that. It's just that the culture hasn't evolved to allow them to do that. So they're in some ways, they're victims of the culture. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame because, and I think Terrence Romeo is one, and I love Terrence. I think he's a tremendous player. But you take the ball out of his hands, he has a hard time being effective on the floor. Put the ball in his hands, he can do amazing things, either from his hands to the rim or his hands to a shooter. But Terrence would have very few what we call hockey assists, reading one step beyond what happens when the ball leaves his hands. And this is where I think great basketball and great basketball players live. So that's my view.
That's a very philosophical way of looking at the sport and the sport here. And Man, I'm glad that some of my listeners are getting a chance to hear some of this, because I don't think that they get that normally. And you look at, like you mentioned, you look at guys there's a lot of guys that are able to score at a certain level one-on-one with the ball. But off the ball stuff is definitely not our strength. And we have a tough time defending that as well, because we don't do it. We never practice against it. So if you never practice against it, I watched Korea, they beat us, I don't know, last time I checked it was 10 of the last 11 games or something crazy. And you're like, that should not be happening, not with the talent that we have and how passionate and the support that we have. But they move well without the ball. They pass the ball really well, and we have a very difficult time defending. They can shoot the ball, but they can shoot it really well when nobody's defending them.
At that level, most people can.
Yeah. So that's been some of the frustration that I've had, and it's refreshing to hear that coming from you. What do you think we can do to slowly change? I know you're doing your part at Ateneo. I'm assuming you hold coaches clinics, I think, that I've seen, trying to change that mindset to where we can compete at some of the higher levels. I
think, originally it's kind of like being an alcoholic. You got to admit there's a problem first, and I think that's difficult. And I understand that. I understand, because basketball in this country is on a high. It's always on a high. It's been on a high for, 70, 80 years. So it's very difficult when you're having so much success to look at yourself and say what's wrong. And yet as a coach, you've got to do that constantly. I said to you when I went to Ateneo, it was a learning curve all over for me. If I had been stubborn and arrogant and said, look, my way or the highway, I'd probably be out of that job already, right? You've got to adapt yourself to where you think you should be. And I think every coach should aspire to be a great coach. And I think right now you got Igor Kokoschka now going to Phoenix, the first European coach. There are many European coaches on NBA staffs now. They get it in the U.S. They get that the best basketball is played from an intellectual standpoint in Europe. So they're trying to blend that with the great athleticism and the great culture of America, right? But we don't get that here. We don't get that. And until we get that, there's not going to be a desire to change. So, climb the highest mountain, shout into the wilderness all you want, but until people are prepared to listen, we're not going to change.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a challenge going forward, and hopefully we can find a way to, listen and open our eyes and grow, because if not, it's going to be tough to be successful against some of the teams that I think we can be if it's channeled the right way.
Look, there's no reason or excuse, and I think I can speak from experience. When I took a New Zealand team and we impressed on them almost 20 years ago a lot of the same messages that I'm talking about right here, but we were so insular in New Zealand. We had total control of everything because it wasn't a basketball country. Nobody questioned anything that we did, so it was easy to create change. Here it's very difficult.
Yeah.
But there's no reason with the talent that we have in this country. And people talk about, we're not big. Rubbish. We have plenty of big players in this country. Plenty. We don't have, scores of them, but we have plenty to make a roster of 12 guys. But until we teach those guys, until the message gets through, you got to play the game a certain way, we're not going to be successful. And yet there's no excuse for us not to be successful at the highest level. We should be a top 15 basketball nation in this world, in my opinion.
Well, hopefully we're on the path to somehow get there. Hopefully sooner than later, we will see. But it sounds like there's a lot of growing to do on our side. I got to ask you this. Want to change topics here a little bit. What happened, Gilas, Australia, the Philippine arena? What was your take on what happened there?
Oh, no comment. No, we're having a friendly chat here, and there is a lot of political friction around this. And so I have to be, I'm honest, I have to be somewhat careful in what I say, because a lot of people, there have been sanctions, and you know, a lot of things have happened, and a lot of toes have been stepped on. My standpoint, I'm old school, Eric. I'm really old school. Fights happen. You know, they've happened from the beginning of time in sport. They happen. I saw a women's volleyball fight the other day. Now, how that can happen, I don't know, but it did. You know, sport is a highly emotional activity. I wish it weren't. I wish players could play more detached and more intelligently, but it is a highly charged, highly emotional environment. And we had a situation where that game was not handled by the referees. Nobody, you know, and I know people have commented on it, but to me, one of the biggest villains in this is FIBA. How you put an Omani referee, a Saudi referee, and a Lebanese referee, who he's okay. But the Omani and the Saudi have never been on a court like that. Between two teams as highly, in that environment where Australia is coming off a loss to Japan. And I know Australia intimately. I mean intimately. So I can tell you a lot about them. They're going out on the floor to get under your skin. They are the best in the world at that. Bar none. They are the best in the world. We had a very young team, a lot of young kids on that roster. And it was a recipe for disaster. So a fight happened. Fights happen. You know, Roger played physical. Goulding, you know, is selling everything he can sell, which he does. You got to know Goulding.
Yeah.
You know, Bubbles does that from 10 years ago. Okay, so I know these guys. And he sold it really well. Frustrated Roger. Roger, you know, made a tough play. The referees made their call. Should have been the end of it. Unsportsmanlike. Kickert steps in. It's as dirty a shot as you're going to see. That happens too, right? And that should have been handled right there in that moment. Jason and Andre reacted. That happens. That's a fight. Everything after that was wrong.
Yeah.
Up to that point in time, it could have been managed. You know, it would have been ooh, ah, you know, a couple of punches thrown, guys get ejected, they're suspended for a game. You know, that's the rules, and it's over. Can't come off the bench.
Yeah.
You just can't. You know, and everything that happened after that happened because of that. So, you know, why did that happen? I don't know. But it can't happen. The Australians controlled their bench. We didn't. And so we pay the penalty now.
Yeah, I've had some comments on my past podcasts, and I've had some interesting feedback from people, and I understand it's very emotional when you're talking about countries going at it and something like that happened. But I'm in agreement with you. Like I thought that Kickert overreacted. Then I thought our bench overreacted to compensate for that. And like you said, I was okay with Jason and Blatch. Like at least those are the players that are on the court. It's still a manageable situation.
And that's a reaction.
Yeah.
Everything after that is not a reaction.
Yeah.
It's you know, I got to make a decision. And you know, as a player, in that instant, you might react and throw that elbow or throw a punch even, right? And you're gonna regret that. But coming off the bench, that's a calculated decision. Can't happen.
Yeah, I wanted to get your take on that, and it was unfortunate that it happened. I am happy. How do you feel now that we are sending an Asian Games team? I think that's a step in the right direction, and I was disappointed that they weren't going to go, and now they're going to go, and it looks like they put together a decent team, a team that could be competitive.
Look, I was sympathetic with the decision not to go because it's a lot of money to send what is not your featured team to a featured, competition, and everybody can say, well, that's the job of the SPP, and that's why they spend the money. But you really are charged with a national team program to do the best that you can, and that comes with the decisions of whether you send the team or not. But what I liked was, the sentiment, the public sentiment in a basketball country was very much against it, and I liked the SPP, reacting to that and saying, okay, we hear you. We might not think this is the best spend of our money. We might think it's better spent in rebuilding for the next FIBA window because, I don't care how much MVP has put into this sport over the last 15 years, which is a massive amount. Yeah. And he should never be criticized for any decision he makes because of that. Never. But I understand that people want to see a team there. And when they reacted the way they did, SBP said, okay, we're listening. We hear you. We might not think this is the best spend, but because this is your country, this is your team, we're going to go ahead and spend the money. And you're right, they've assembled a tough team. Yeah, they've assembled an extremely tough team.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. When I looked at the roster, I was like, whoa, I saw some names on there. I saw Stanley Pringle and some of the other guys there. I was like, whoa, that team could be good. I mean, they don't have a lot of time to prepare and whatnot, but they should be able to compete, I think. So.
Not to put any additional pressure on Stanley, but he's the best guard in Asia. and I'm telling you, it isn't even close.
Interesting.
In my opinion, he's also the best choice as a naturalized player for the Philippines.
Okay. That's an interesting take. That's another thing I wanted to ask you. I know that we've had Andre here for a while. I think they've been looking for a replacement. It's not the easiest thing to do.
Correct.
And so now we're sticking with Blatch a little bit. Why do you think Stanley should be the number one guy for us?
He's a game changer.
He's really good.
And he's the only one who's a game changer. Because the ball is in his hands a lot, and it belongs in his hands a lot. See, Andre, he dominates the ball a lot, and he shouldn't.
Yeah.
That's a mistake. But Andre is very difficult to manage. I can say that from experience. And Chot won't say that because he's such a good guy, but I can say it from experience. He's almost impossible to manage. And we talk about efficiencies. That's an issue. Whereas putting the ball in Stanley's hands, he's a great ball screen guard. Now you're going to have a national team. Unfortunately, at Asia, you're not going to have Junmar and Greg, but hopefully they will be there later on. So having a great ball screen guard with those guys is really critical. And Paul Lee also happens to be a great ball screen guard.
Yeah, he is.
That backcourt tandem will scare the hell out of the Asian teams. And I'm serious, that is a great backcourt tandem.
Yeah, it is.
So with Christian there, and Christian's such a hard worker, you can't have Christian and Stanley in the FIBA team.
That's right.
But you got them together now. And Christian will do a great job with Stanley. But Stanley is a game changer. Offensively, defensively. I just think he's a superior player. He has great experience in the game, played in Russia.
Yep.
And what a lot of people don't know about Stanley, because he's a very quiet, humble guy, he's got tremendous pride in his performance. And now you put a Philippine uniform on top of that pride, you got something special, in my opinion. We'll see.
That's a great opinion. I like that take. I'm sold. I'm sold already.
We'll see. I might be wrong, but I don't think so. I think Stanley's going to step up and do some special things.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I've been a big fan of his for a long time, and I've watched him since I think he started out at Indonesia and Asia playing in the ABL. So I've been a big fan of his. So looking forward to him wearing the uniform and playing in these Asian games. Is so fun because there's other athletes. You're living in the athletes' village, and a lot of I played in FIBA Asia in 2007, and it's kind of like the Jones Cup, where unless you're playing the host team, nobody's really there, right? So my experience in the Asian games in 2002 was much more like, whoa, this is like a real international competition. You have other athletes, like I said, flags waving, a lot of people there showing support, and then you can go to in your downtime, you can go to other sporting events. So it's Asian games kind of neat, I think.
It's a small Olympics, and not so small because it's Asia, which is a huge zone. But I've been to the Olympics, so for me, when the Asian Games is a similar experience. You're right. You're at a FIBA Asia tournament for basketball, and everybody's in the same hotel, but nobody talks to each other, because they're all competing. Yeah. But with the the Asian Games or the Olympics, you talk to athletes from other sports. It's a very relaxing environment, and a very interesting environment.
What do you think of Kai Soto? What do you think of him?
I think he's going to be an outstanding player. I think that. His development curve is pretty extreme, and we watched him over at Ateneo and pretty impressive. But I think that's where the focus has got to be. And if there was one concern I have about how he's being handled, I think he's being put in too many teams, because everybody wants him because he's going to get you wins.
Yeah.
But is that going to be a win for him in the end? And is that going to ultimately be a win for the Philippines? because what he really needs to do is he really needs to work on his body, get his body into as great a shape as it can be at his age. And his skills are pretty advanced, but they're never, where they can possibly be.
Yeah.
So I think his potential is huge, and I think that's where all of his development should be targeted, at his potential, not can we use him to win games.
Yeah.
He's got to use us to become a great player, and then that will turn around and service Philippine basketball in the long run.
Yeah, it's a super interesting thing to look at, just because I'm not sure there's been a prospect like him here with his height and his background. I was teammates with his dad. I'm feeling really old, but
You are.
but yeah, and now it's like it's still. I feel like everyone's got an opinion on what he should do, where he should go to train, who should he stay here, should he go abroad, should he do all these things, and sometimes, like you said, people are gonna use him for their benefit, and really, what does he want? How far? Well, like you said, his potential. Like, does he want to fulfill his potential? What's the best for him? Not necessarily what's the other way around.
Look, I think there are some wrongs for him. There's some things he shouldn't do, some places he shouldn't go. I wouldn't like to see him go to the U.S. because over there they are very, very win-oriented. And so I think that, if he went to a college, which he can't do now, but, they're going to use him for the profile of their program, whatever it is. So I wouldn't like to see the U.S. be involved until the NBA comes knocking, which I think the potential is there for that. And I'd like to see him kept here, but kept here under a very strict training regime, which is bringing in outside and influences and teaching him the game with European coaches, some American coaches that work on the body and the skill development. All of that is good. I'd like to see him stay. But if he ended up going somewhere outside, I'd like to see him go to Europe, if that were the option.
That would be super interesting, because they have a history there of developing a well-rounded, skilled big man. Big man, exactly. How would the process work? Like, he would join a club there, and then they would take him in and train him and groom him?
Well, look, this is no secret, but it's not known here. What the European clubs do when they find prodigies, and he's been contacted by European clubs already, is they want to bring him in, they sign him to a pro contract right away. And a long-term pro contract, 6-7 years, up until their early 20s. And the reason that they do that is because they're looking to develop the player for the NBA buyout. That's how the clubs make money.
Okay. I didn't know that.
If they fall short of that, they end up developing a great big man. And the only downside risk for them is if he doesn't pan out, then they pay a full professional contract, but not that much, right? And usually they backload those contracts. So in the 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old, they're getting better money. But by then they're usually playing for that club professionally. Mm-hmm. Or they've been drafted. If they're drafted, the NBA can't get the rights unless they pay for them. And there's some clubs in Europe that do that as a business. And they do a really good job with that too. There's no benefit in them if they don't develop the player. So they really are focused on development.
Very interesting.
No reason we shouldn't do that here, to be honest.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. So interesting. Well, we're coming near the end of the show, and I wanted to ask you last couple questions. This question, it's a two-part question. I've asked every guest that I've had on, so I'm going to ask you the same. If you could go back in time 10 years and give yourself a piece of advice for 60 seconds, what would that piece of advice be?
It's a great question. I think it would be that your professional life, no matter how passionate you are about it, should never compromise your personal life. And I think that it happens to a lot of us quite often, because either the demand is there from our professional employers and bosses, or our passion makes us lose sight of the really important things in life, which is taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of your loved ones. So I think that, in a 37-year career, there's been more than one time when I've lost my way, so to speak, and either had to have an event which brought me back to myself and back to my most important things, or, somebody looked at me, and Alex Compton, a great friend of mine, has had this talk to me on more than one occasion. Don't lose your life in your love. Keep your life as the most important thing, and the most important things in your life as the most important thing. So I thank him for that publicly. And I'm an old campaigner. I love the game, but you can't lose your life in your career.
Interesting, great answer. Second part of that question is, where do you want to be 10 years from now?
Still alive. I want to be next to my wife, preferably sitting on a beach, a mountainside, or a fishing boat, and enjoying the view. And I happen to have a spectacular wife, and she means everything to me. She's a lot of fun to be around, and I don't get to be around her as much as I would love to now because she runs a business in Greece, so we spend a significant amount of time apart. And 10 years from now, that can't be that way, So that's where I'd like to be.
Okay, excellent. Do you see yourself coaching still 10 years from now?
Why not? If I maintain my health, I'll be 70 years old. But they say 60's the new 40, 70's the new 50. There's a lot of 50-year-old coaches out there. So I try to keep myself in shape. I try to not give in to the years too much. But it's hard to say 10 years from now what's happening with your life or with your health. I just pray to God that that He continues to take care of me as He has and blesses me, and if He does, then why not? I think hopefully my brain will still be sharp, and I can still relate to the players and have some value.
Excellent, good stuff. And last question: do you have any daily habits that you do every day that is geared towards your success? Like an example of that would be meditation. Like some people meditate every morning. They feel that it helps them throughout the day, and over a long period of time that helps them. Do you have any habits?
It's an interesting question. I was talking to my team yesterday because in their individual practice in the morning, they got a little bit chaotic in one of the drills. And I said, you're young people. You like chaos. It's natural. You don't like discipline and order and those sort of things. And I said, in the sporting world, you have to learn to be disciplined. You have to learn to do exactly what you're talking about. You have to learn to have routines to take care of your body, to recover properly, and all that sort of stuff. Personally, I'm an incredibly chaotic individual. I'm extremely ordered and disciplined in my coaching, but in my personal life, no. I can get up at 6 in the morning. I can get up at 10 in the morning another day, and I can eat properly and eat improperly the next day. I'm honestly, I'm really chaotic. I'm a fly by the seat of my pants kind of person. Drives my family wild sometimes, but yeah, that's kind of my nature. So now I'm trying to eat properly, but in terms of routines, not so much.
Okay, that's interesting. I was trying to pick people's minds, some of my guests, to see if they have different, some people don't have any. Some people make sure they do some things first thing in the morning or before they go to bed. So I was like there's not one formula for success or for being successful. There's many different ways to do it. So I always try to get a take from my guests like that. So
I think I'm a bit like my dad, who was really old school. When something was required, he had tremendous willpower. So I know if I have to do something, I could stay up till 3 in the morning. I got to be up at 6, no problem. I'm up, do my job, but I might stay up to 3 anyway. Watching a Red Sox game or something like that. That's the closest I get to a routine, is checking the Red Sox results every day.
How are they doing this year?
Unbelievable. Well, they're putting together one of the greatest seasons in the history of baseball. So I'm smiling all the time.
Excellent. Well, okay, I'm going to wrap it up here, but before you go, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great philosophical and learning experience for me, hearing from you, your perspective on what's going on in the country and your journey and how you got here. So wanted to wish you the best of luck in the upcoming season. And thanks so much for coming on.
Look, it's been a lot of fun, just to have a chat with a good basketball man and a guy who's giving something back. And, I hope you get something for yourself out of this. everybody should follow Eric. He's a good interviewer, and we had a lot of fun talking basketball. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Before we go, I'd like to ask you to, if you haven't written a review for this podcast on your podcast app, please give me a 5-star review and write a couple comments. Take a minute or two. My Facebook page, facebook.com/emenk30. There you can stay up to date on my podcast, the upcoming vlog. I'm doing one this week when I go to the History Channel's convention on Friday, and all of my other appearances. So please go there. It's a community of over 30,000 people now, and I'm looking to continue to grow that and bring quality content to you guys. Also, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/emenk30. There are videos of all of my podcast episodes and all of my vlog episodes. I've done 97 vlogs and 91 podcasts now. So a lot of things are going up and a few classic games from the 1990s or 2000s. So go there, check it out, subscribe if you can. And I will be back very, very soon, probably next week. Until then, I am Eric Menk, and this has been Staying Major. Thanks for watching. You can subscribe to my channel by clicking on my face right here. Don't forget to check out the important links in the description below, and for more Staying Major, click on the video over there. We'll see you next time.